Thank you, thank you. All right. So yeah, this is about voice interfaces for the car. Before we dig into that, just a little bit about me. I've been working as a professional designer for quite some time, both in enterprise and consumer. Some of the places are rather large, some of them are rather small. I now work for, as Andy mentioned, I work for Mercedes Benz R&D North America. That's our office in the middle. I don't really know what that thing is, but it just kind of was there when I showed up. So, and yeah, as she mentioned, I'm also one half of the Design Review podcast. Me and my friend John, we talk about issues that affect design and designers. And we do have an episode coming out soon. So please wait patiently. One thing I also want to mention, I just got back from a 13-day cycling trip across northern Spain. So I know that's not what we're here to talk about right now, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about it later. So yeah, so what I have for you today is basically a brief summary of this project that I worked on. Basically, it was a 2-year project that went from the early ideation for a next generation speech interface that went all the way to the start of production. And it was announced finally this year at CES in January. And it's part of Mercedes' new in-car infotainment system, also known as MBUX. I was the UI concept lead for the speech interface, so this means that I was responsible for the UI and the interaction design, and this was done here in Sunnyvale, California, and I worked in close collaboration with the speech technology team in Germany. So yeah, as I mentioned, my work started in 2015, but as typical to the automotive industry, a lot of the discussions for the product started much earlier. I actually don't even know when they started, but yeah. So this is where it started. This was the product that existed on the market at the time. This is basically a teleprompter UI. And I'll explain what that is in a little bit. But there might have been a newer version that came out in the time that we were working on things, but it was basically the same thing, just with a little bit different look to it. And so how this works is you press a button on the steering wheel with a weird little like speaker icon, and then this kind of pop-up looking thing appears over the interface. And you know, it's basically just a bunch of text. And so what sort of challenges do you think there are for this? So one of the big things was this was engineered for the capabilities of speech technology at that time. This was probably built, I don't know, or at least designed maybe 10 years ago. So a lot of what speech technology was back then was based on like keywords and formal grammars that you had to use in order to get the system to do things that you wanted. The interface, as a result, was then optimized for displaying the maximum number of text lines possible, because you needed to be able to say exactly these sort of commands and exactly this sort of phrasing, because if you mix this up a little bit, it wouldn't know what you were talking about. Another particular sort of challenge was, you know, this is getting into some graphic design, but from a pure typographical standpoint, there is like no hierarchy here, right? You can't tell, if you were just driving your car and you press this button and you looked at that, you wouldn't be able to tell, you know, really what are you supposed to do next, right? And so, not really kind of a user problem, but the form of this interface then sort of doesn't indicate kind of the next steps or what you sort of need to do with it. And so how do we start thinking about the next generation? And it basically starts with this. Voice interaction should feel as natural as everyday conversation. You want it to be simple enough that you can just understand without having to read a bunch of text. And so this has an impact on how we think about interface design. This idea is also supported by Nielsen's usability heuristics. This one is the second one on the list, match between the system and the real world. You should generally try to incorporate all 10 of them. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with Nielsen's heuristics. We did a podcast on all of them, so you should go listen to them. But you should try and incorporate all 10, but this one in particular was really important for this project. And then furthermore, for in-car use, speech offers a really big advantage for the user. Traditionally, the user would have to learn how to use a hierarchical system, right? So assuming that the content that they're looking for is those little dots at the bottom, the user would have to learn how to navigate through this architecture in order to get at all the stuff that they're looking for down there. But with speech, they can just jump directly to the things that they want. And they don't have to be in a particular page. They can just say, hey, play my playlist or whatever. And ideally, it should work. It was also really important for me to understand how speech systems actually work. You know, it's very easy to sit there and imagine like, oh yeah, we can just say whatever you want, and it'll just do whatever you told it to do. But in actuality, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. This is a very simplified technical diagram. I'm not going to go in too much detail about this because there's a lot of stuff in there, but basically, if you start on the left with the guy giving a little command, the system records it and takes your audio file, processes it into text, and then the text gets also parsed by the natural language system and then passed to your dialogue system, which then figures out what you meant and what you're trying to ask for, and then it should give you a response, and then assuming all of that worked perfectly, the guy should be happy at the other end. And so when starting to design a voice interface, it's really important to think about all of the key moments that you have within your system. I knew right away when we were starting that we didn't want to just recreate that old teleprompter thing because it's not, you know, that's just not going to work in today's world. We also had, for this system, we were incorporating a lot more natural language commands, so the possibilities of the kinds of things you could request started to open up a lot more. So in terms of the key moments, for in-car use, this mainly centered on three main things: the navigation, entertainment, and communication. So obviously you're getting in the car, right? So navigation is probably the most important thing. And then as you're driving, you want some music, or you want you know, your audiobooks or podcasts, like the design review. So you want to have something, you know, playing in the background. And then lastly, probably some communication. I don't recommend that you send text messages and make phone calls while you're driving, but you know, it's possible you can do that. And so knowing all of this, we set out to design various UI archetypes for those like three main functional areas. And those key screens were things that were going to help define the rest of the experience. All right, so now I can show you some examples of the screens that we created. So it all starts with this. And this is what we called the mini voice UI. And so when you activate the speech system, either by the button press on the steering wheel, or you can say, hey, Mercedes, the voice UI kind of comes over and does a sort of partial takeover of the screen. And this is so that it doesn't obscure the whole interface of what you were doing right before. Now, excuse the typo. I didn't make this screen, so it's not my fault. But but notice there's no teleprompter here, right? So in the previous screen, when you activated it, there was a big list of text. We threw that away for the most part in this screen, and that's because we decided to only show the teleprompters If the user activated the system but didn't do anything, I think we had a delay of roughly about 4.5 seconds. So if they activated the system and they didn't do anything for 4.5 seconds, we took that as a cue to say, hey, maybe they don't know what to do next, maybe they're unsure of what they want to do. Let's give them some help and show them some things that the speech system is capable of doing. I could, but I think we have some time at the end for questions. Yeah. Okay, so imagine now they make a request for dinner at an Italian restaurant. We show them this screen. Now I tried to generally stay away from having too many text lists, but you know, we didn't win this particular battle. But what I do want to point out is we now have an information hierarchy. So that's pretty good. The other big innovation here is we included the map with the list of places. This was a difficult battle that we fought. The map was really never designed to be extended into other things, so it was only used in the navigation app. So we pushed really hard to get this in here. But the point is that now when you request for places, you can see where they are, not just not just with the address or the distance, but you can actually see where they are in relation to where you are, which is also really helpful as you're sort of driving your car along the interstate. And so from here, the user can start navigation directly. They can say navigate to Olive Garden, assuming that's what you want. Or you can actually ask for more information on one of the specific places, and you get a screen that looks kind of like this. And so let's say instead of Italian restaurants, they had asked to call Jesse. Now, if the system can't arbitrate which Jesse they want, yeah, Jesse Pinkman, of course. But if the system couldn't figure out which Jesse they were looking for, we show them a screen kind of like this. And here they can select any one of these. They could say call Jesse Plankton's mobile number, or they can say call number 3, something like that. And additionally, we assume that people know, who's in their address book and what information that they have. But if they really needed that extra bit of information, they could ask for more information about a particular person. And just like in the map case, they have all these different options available. So this is just a brief run through on kind of what we did, the results of all this work that we did. So I have some principles here we can talk about. These are things that actually came out of the work that we did. I didn't want to just define a bunch of principles and then shoehorn all the design into the principles. It's really important, I think, sometimes to start from just doing some work and then figuring stuff out as you go. So the first principle here is that the interface obviously must support the voice interactions, right? It's kind of obvious. You're designing a voice UI, you should make it support the voice interactions. But specifically here is one of the things we found out in research was that when users start interacting with a system in one particular modality, they tend to stay with that modality. So if they started an interaction by voice, they tend to continue interacting with the system by voice. And likewise, if they started interacting by touch, they would just sort of continue along their journey with touch. Now notice the differences between the two screens that I'm showing here. So these are effectively the same UI, but on the top we have the UI for just the general system in MBUX, and then down at the bottom is the voice UI version of it. In the top, the screen really emphasizes the particular data for a given person. So in this case, Frederick Fisherman lives at, I'm not even going to pronounce that, but the emphasis is on the data. And what we did in the voice UI that's different is we emphasized the text labels. And the reason for that is because when you're speaking to the system, you don't actually have to refer to Jesse Plankton's phone number specifically, you can just say, hey, call the mobile number. So there was no real need to emphasize the actual digits in the way that the main system did. The next principle here is that an effective voice UI should really be designed as a modular system. Modular UI design really is helpful because it can support a really broad and diverse set of requests. As I mentioned, we didn't get everything exactly the way that we wanted. I would have liked to have done more, but the idea behind this is that the user should be able to look quickly at the screen, understand how it works, and basically get on to the next part of the dialogue. And this is especially true for the in-car experience. If you think about all the things that are happening, let's say you're driving down Market Street, think about all the stuff that's possibly happening in front of you. And now imagine that while you're trying to also have a dialogue with a computer system that may or may not understand you, it gets really complicated. And so we really wanted to simplify the UI, and we did that by basically reusing a lot of the same UI concepts and UI components. The benefit of doing that, of course, is that once you learn how something works in one part of the system, you just reuse those exact same skills in another part. So here you have, as you saw, Jesse Pinkman and his friends. And down at the bottom, you have the same style of UI, but for music. So you have song names and artist names and all that stuff. So the next principle here is that a minimal design tends to be more effective. And this is sort of a general design rule. It's important to keep the UI elements to a minimum, but in particular for in-car UI design, the system really needs to be usable without having to look at it and study it. When you're on your phone, on the train or something, you have the benefit of time. You can sit there and study the phone, until who knows, maybe you even miss your stop. But in a car, people are just sort of glancing at it as, when they can, and their attention is ideally more on the road, right, and more on what's going on in front of them. And so when you reduce kind of the clutter of the interface, when you reduce a lot of the elements down just to kind of the bare essential parts of it, it's actually far easier for people to make decisions, right? Sometimes people tend to think that, hey, if you just show more options, you get to choose from more things. But what we found is it's actually the opposite is true. The more things you show, the more things that people have to read and decipher, and then it just gets confusing. And it's that whole paralysis by analysis thing. And so the more you can do to kind of reduce the UI to just sort of the essential bits, the better it'll be. The next principle here is about the system itself. So it's really important to show a clear indication visually of what the system is doing. Feedback is really critical for voice systems, because how do you know when to speak, right? How do you know when the system is actually listening to you? Sometimes this is also done by audio cues. So in this case, you'll hear it kind of beep and make different noises to sort of let you know that it's ready. But if they look at the screen, you kind of want to give them some feedback that, hey, I'm hearing you and this is happening. Or in the bottom part when it's processing, like, oh, don't talk now. I'm busy doing something. And so yeah, it's really important that you provide a clear, visible. Visual indication of what the system is doing. And so yeah, as I mentioned already, we designed the system to change dynamically after the person pauses for 4.5 seconds. And this principle is really important, is to be able to provide assistance when the user needs it, rather than, having them read a whole long list of commands, and then maybe they remember them, maybe they don't, and then they're stuck somewhere and they don't know what to do next. It's better to just provide the assistance when they need it. And so we tested this concept and found that it was actually more effective that way. We did some usability studies. We found that people were able to get on to the next steps much more easily. So the example here is in again, when we show Jesse Pinkman and they pause, sometimes we might show these additional text labels at the bottom where it indicates what sort of things that they can do. And it's not just always call mobile. It depends on what sort of information the user has, or the contact has. So if it's their home number, it might say something else. We also did some additional research that showed for the in-car use, 4.5 seconds was actually the perfect time to do this kind of dynamic UI switching. We found that if you did it too quickly, so let's say 2 seconds, the user wouldn't have enough time to sort of recognize that something had changed. And if we did it at maybe like 6 seconds, it would just take too long. They would never notice it. And so 4.5 seconds was the ideal, because it allowed the user to be able to look at the road, and then look at the screen, look back at the road, and then something changed, and then they look back, and then hopefully they have the right sort of text labels there. By the way, the 4.5 seconds is for in-car. So if it's something else, you might need a different timing or something like that. Okay, so I think I went through rather quickly, but there's a little video here just to show some of how this works. Is it gonna play? Hopefully.
Hey, Mercedes.
Yes, please.
Do I need an umbrella tomorrow?
It's not actually playing. Yeah. Was it playing? The sound was playing, but there should be a video with it.
Yes, please.
Do I need an umbrella tomorrow?
Well, imagine footage. It's really good.
Tomorrow it will be rainy in Las Vegas with a low of 41 and a high of 54 degrees.
Hey, Mercedes.
I don't know what to do about this right now.
Speak now, please.
Anyways.
I'm hungry.
Please.
Well, you can hear. He mentioned things like, I'm hungry. We designed some, we call these indirect speech commands. So by saying I'm hungry, you're not exactly telling the system, take me to an Italian restaurant. You're just saying, hey, I'm hungry, and the system knows to go find you places to go eat. Or he mentioned another one about I'm cold, and so in this case, the car would turn on the heater. You can also say, hey, turn up the heat or something like that, and the car would do that. But in this case, the person said it indirectly, and the car was able to turn on the heat. And so these are kinds of things like the kinds of natural language things that are important to think about as well when you're designing for speech. Unfortunately, the video didn't play, but I don't know. Did it? Yeah.
Hey, Mercedes.
Yes, please.
Do I need an umbrella tomorrow?
Tomorrow it will be rainy in Las Vegas with a low of 41 and a high of 54 degrees.
That's showing right now.
Hey, Mercedes.
Speak now, please.
I'm hungry.
Please select an entry.
More options.
Okay. It's okay.
We want to make sure you get the full experience.
There you go.
Slice this into the video. All right. Now, if you don't have, if it doesn't work now,
it's not playing over. It's not playing over there though. Okay.
Hey, Mercedes.
Yes, please.
Anybody want a Mercedes?
Yeah. Yes, please. There you go.
And then also the sound sounded like really bad.
Yeah.
No, it's not about that. I have to actually adjust the sound.
Do I need an umbrella tomorrow?
Tomorrow it will be rainy in Las Vegas.
All right. Thank you.
Are you gonna do it?
Hey Mercedes,
Yes, please.
do I need an umbrella tomorrow?
Tomorrow it will be rainy in Las Vegas with a low of 41 and a high of 54 degrees.
Hey Mercedes,
Speak now, please.
I'm hungry.
Please select an entry.
More options. Number 4.
What would you like to do now?
Start guidance.
Starting route guidance. Please follow the road for half a mile.
Welcome from the CES 2018 in Las Vegas. Today here we have presented our new Mercedes Benz user experience. We call it MBUX. So let me go in detail with you with few of the features to show how they work. Now I would like to go to one of the important feature, which is a speech. With this system, with the speech, we are coming to a totally different level. For example, let me use something for navigation. Hey Mercedes,
Yes, please.
navigate to Palo Alto.
I am starting route guidance to Palo Alto, California.
Now in this example, you can see that just by saying a catchword, I was able to activate the whole navigation, and the system response has been excellently amazing to see that how fast it happened. You don't have to do and go in any menus. For example, if I would like to do anything on the music, I can still stay on the navigation map and I could say, hey Mercedes,
Yes, please.
play Love Me Do from Beatles. And here you have your music also. So especially on the speech side, while driving the car, we have reached an amazing level of accuracy, as well as we have an intelligence which is continuously learning on the background to make the system even better. I have to say, I appreciate the hard work which has been done within the Mercedes Benz from all different departments, in the design, in the digital vehicle and mobility, in the sales, and all other organizations which have participated in creating such a great system. Thank you, and see you soon.
All right. That's it. Yeah, it's there. No, it's good.
Thank you. I did actually press play and test it
Meh.
before. But
It's fine.
that's all good. Is it? Here we go.
It's working. We got it to work.
Back. Okay,
Yeah.
So you don't actually need. All right.
Yeah.
So Julie, what is Julie? Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah, the microphone. How much? We could do 2 questions.
2 questions.
Let's start at 7:10, and I'm not here. Hold on.
What do you want to handle? I'll go over there. Okay.
Over here in the front with the white shirt right here.
Okay.
I want you kids to ask some questions, but I'm also curious what you ask because we're speaking next, so it's kind of interesting.
Okay. So my question is, right after the person, so for the cafe, they chose that. So they chose which place they wanted to go, and then the voice UI asked an open-ended question. How many open-ended and closed-ended questions do you guys do, and what have you done in your research within that?
That's a good question. I honestly couldn't tell you how many there were. I wasn't necessarily responsible for all of the dialogue design. We worked with the speech team in Germany to develop. Well, they wrote a lot of the dialogues, and it's a very painful process. There's a lot of specifications and like really complicated looking diagrams in there that probably you don't want to ever look at in your life. I had to read them all. They were like 100-page documents. The open-ended questions, they're basically there for...
I guess the main question for me is like, how do you, like having an open-ended question, how do you create an interface that supports, like if people don't know what to ask or to have the least amount of errors, like how do you support that?
So I would say the same sort of stuff that I mentioned already, right? So if you know at a particular point in the dialogue that you're reaching one of these possible branches where there's a bunch of open-ended possibilities, you could use the teleprompter thing that we had, where the UI shifts a little bit and maybe gives you a little bit more indication of what's next. The thing is they're not truly open-ended, right? Even today with natural language, there's still kind of a limited number of things that you can do. It's not like you can, you know, when the system asks you like, what do you want to do next? It's not like you can just like completely like do something else, right? Like open the trunk. That's not going to work. It's really within that dialogue that it's asking you, what do you want to do next? So either it's like start navigation, show me more information. I think play music, but that would be completely switching the domain to something else. So then it might work. I think that does work. I'm trying to remember from like 2 years ago. But then it's, as I mentioned, it's completely switching the domain.
So you're trusting that the user is going to follow the same conversation in that.
Yeah. And in general, people they would have some sort of goal in mind, right? So if I'm asking for look for a cafe, there's probably a reason why I want to do that. Probably because I want to go there, or at least like find out some information about it. It's probably not to. I'm not asking for the cafe because I want to play my Spotify playlist, right? So, so yeah, it's kind of limited in terms of what you can do once you get to one of those points. But we felt it was natural to just let people figure out. They probably had some idea already, and just let them figure out what they wanted.
I said we had another time for questions, but we don't. Actually, we have to move on to our next speaker.
Okay.
But thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.